Andor episodes 1, 2, and 3 just dropped, so let's get straight into the breakdown. We first begin on Morlana One, an entirely new planet, and we learn that this is governed by the Preox Morlana, a security company under a contract agreement with the Empire. We also learn that the date is 5 BBY, 5 years before the Battle of Yavin and the events of A New Hope. Cassian enters what looks to be the red light district of Morlana One, and we get the most adult cantina scene ever in recent Star Wars history. Not since the George Lucas era have we had such highly suggestive cantina scenes, and I'm all for it. We learn that Cassian is looking for his sister, a Kenari girl, all the while pissing off the two Preox cops in the background. When Cassian gets nothing, he leaves, where he is then shaken down by the pre-moor cops. What then proceeds is probably the most realistic brawl ever seen in Star Wars, where one of the guards by the name of Verlo dies accidentally after hitting his head too hard on the ground. The other one by the name of Kravas then gets shot in the face once Cassian realizes that he cannot have any witnesses. The whole scene is really just reminiscent of how Cassian killed the rebel informant in Rogue One once he learns that he could be compromised. Really just cementing the idea that Cassian is a survivor willing to do whatever it takes. We then land on the planet Faris in the Morlani system, a free trade sector where Cassian lives. We then get some weird looking hounds up to some dog-like antics, and we find Cassian's hideout in what looks to be the inside of a ship. We get a flashback where we learn that Cassian's real name is Kassa, and he is from the planet Kenari. Cassian and his sister and the rest of the tribe watch a ship explode and crash, likely from the actions of the separatist insurgent Marva and her friend, that we will see later. Back to the present, we learn that Faris is a scrapyard, and the gloves hanging on the wall belongs to the workers that work there, but I can't help but wonder if the missing gloves here and here are for workers who died on the job, suggesting to us how dangerous the job is. Cassian goes to meet with Brasso, who agrees to help him build an alibi, and Brasso is a real G here, helping to develop his cover story. We cut to Morlana One at the pre-moor HQ. The dialogue between the deputy and chief inspector is a very interesting one. The chief clearly just wants to sweep it all under the rug, and you can see that his years of experience clearly tells him that the two dead pre-moor officers weren't exactly saints and likely put themselves in that position to begin with. This is perfectly juxtaposed with the deputy inspector, who is more incessant about going after the killer, clearly a much younger and naive officer eager to make a name for himself. Then the chief drops a very interesting bit of information. We learn that he is on his way to a regional Imperial command review. Now this doesn't sound like any ordinary pre-moor meeting. Instead, the name suggests that this could be a meeting with Imperial officials of the Empire, and as we later learn, the pre-moor was given jurisdiction over this sector to govern on behalf of the Empire, which again confirms that this meeting is a meeting with the Empire, likely to receive performance reports on how things are going. So it actually foreshadows how the Empire will catch wind of Cassian's activities and why they might take an interest in this sector. As we learn in the trailer, there are going to be riots and protests, so it's likely that after learning what went down in episode 3, the Empire might bring down a heavier hand on this sector, causing the unrest. So really just a clever bit of information that foreshadows the later consequences as the series goes on. We then get to meet Bix, who sells spare parts for a living, and Cassian convinces her to get in touch with the buyer, Luthen's character, immediately. So Cassian then says that he has an NS9 Starpath unit with the vector crystals and Imperial seal intact. Now this is supposedly a piece of equipment that can be used to track Imperial coordinates within a sector, a handy piece of equipment for someone who is trying to stay under the radar. Bix initially blows him off, saying that he has been holding out on her, and Cassian fires back, saying that she's been stealing a cut of the profits from everyone, profit that must have rightfully been shared with the rest. Again, just goes to show that in Cassian's world, it's all about survival. Everyone is just clawing at each other to make ends meet. Then Tim, the overprotective jealous boyfriend, steps in and interrupts, asking if they are bidding on the Wobani run. Wobani is a planet located in the Brick sector in the Mid-Rim. Under the Empire, the planet was used as a prison and labor camp for petty criminals. It is also the same planet that Jyn was sent to when she was arrested by the Empire. It was also the same planet Princess Leia visited when she was 16 on a humanitarian mission, and on that mission, she managed to rescue 100 refugees and had them relocated to Alderaan. However, by doing so, she undermined ongoing negotiations between Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, and the Wobani authorities on a resettlement agreement, which ended because the Wobani authorities were too embarrassed and angry to continue. So again, a nice hint towards the political side of Star Wars, something which the Andor show is also set to explore. So who knows, maybe we will hear of this incident later on. We get a flashback to Kenari where we get a better look at Cassian's tribe, and it is surprisingly made up of very young people with no adults inside whatsoever, something which we are also given a clue as to why later on. And what I like about this entire scene is that we get no translation of what is being said. Instead, as the audience, we have to infer everything from their body language and intonations. Cassian gets called out for not paying his debts, and this alien here by the name of Vetch is the same alien that first appeared in The Force Awakens. Tim tries to follow Bix to see where she's going, which is a little creepy if you ask me, but it really just solidifies the whole idea that no one really trusts each other in this part of the galaxy, not even lovers. Bix makes contact with her buyer using Morse code through some sort of repair shop, and based on the interaction between Bix and the repair guy,
I haven't seen you lately.
Some of us were.
Which I initially thought was some friendly banter, but it might also suggest that the guys working at the repair shop don't make a living doing repairs, but instead be sponsored by a mysterious benefactor who is building a network of resistance. I mean, what other reason could there be for a shop like this having a high-tech encoded system of reaching a guy like Luthen? So what if Luthen was the one sponsoring these guys to maintain the shop as an outpost for him to get a hold of special equipment and special people? But I might be reaching here. We cut back to the pre-moor HQ and we see a guy eating blue noodles. This is in fact glow blue noodles created by a four-armed lady chef by the name of Chef Gora Manda. And you can actually find the recipe of this dish in the Star Wars Galaxy Edge cookbook if you are interested in trying it out. We then learn that Faris is actually under pre-moor jurisdiction. The pre-moor decide to put out a notice for a Kenari male matching Cassian's description. And what's super interesting here is that we learn about how bureaucratically inefficient the pre-moor are, as well as the Empire, which gives a great explanation of how people like Andor are able to fall through the cracks and slip by unnoticed. Cassian tries to switch out the identification chip on the ship he borrowed from this guy by the name of Pegla in order to cover his trail. And the conversation quickly turns nasty as Pegla tries to toss Cassian out, basically removing his means of leaving the planet undetected. And it's a rather fast turn of goodwill from Pegla, but it's sort of to be expected from people just trying to keep themselves safe and out of trouble. Again, repeating the idea that no one in this part of the galaxy really trusts anyone. Cassian's tribe heads out to scavenge for the wreckage, leaving his little sister behind, and on we go to the second episode. As the tribe heads out, they walk past what looks to be a massive abandoned mine, which we later learn who was responsible for, and also links in very closely as to why there are no adults in the tribe. The metal grappler hits the hammer on the metal to signal the end of the day, acting as a bell for the local community. And as people head home, if you look closely, you can actually notice a Y-wing parked at the bottom left, which were of course the bombers used by the rebellion. Tim finds the message regarding the hunt for a Kenari male, and Cassian finally returns home to Marva, where he also learns that the pre-moor now have a warrant for him. But what's super interesting here is Marva's reaction to the news. Instead of asking Cassian what happened, she goes on a rant about how they've tried to cover their trail by stating that he was born on Fez, and this is something that was previously established in lore and was always understood as something that might have been a lie. And judging by Marva's reaction, it seems as though this lie is intended to cover a whole lot more of what happened on Kenari, something which we get clues of later on. Cassian and Marva go back and forth on who told who where they are from, and Cassian mentions the name Samo. The name Samo is actually the name of a Jedi, a male Twi'lek youngling who served during the Clone Wars. He was also the Jedi who studied under Yoda on the temple on Coruscant, so perhaps this might suggest that the youngling didn't make it out of Order 66. Marva then talks about all the women Cassian has been with, and she drops the name Femi, which could be alluding to the actress Femi Taylor, although her name is spelled with only one M. Femi Taylor was actually the actress who played Ula, the Twi'lek slave dancer in Jabba's palace, so a really cool Easter egg here. Then there is Carla, which refers to an illustrator who created the concept designs for the movie Rogue One, so another nod to the people behind the scenes. Cassian tells Bix the truth, and Bix tells him that the buyer is coming, all the while Tim is staring in the background. Tim, you absolute creep. Tim decides to report Cassian to the pre-moor authorities, which also makes him a rat, a creepy rat. On the screen Tim is looking at, it writes insert credits, sort of like a public phone that we use in the real world. Which also means that Tim is actually paying to get in contact with the authorities, really just making him a bigger rat than he already is. The authorities pull up an image of Cassian, which is later confirmed by the hostess that Cassian met on the night. Bix makes a late night call to Tim, Tim, you lucky bastard, which also makes Tim one lucky creepy rat. We then get to meet Sergeant Linus Mosk, an over-enthusiastic cop, and alongside the deputy, they decide to launch an operation to capture Andor. The surgeon then goes on to explain that the corporate tactical forces are the Empire's first line of defense, which is a very interesting tidbit of information on how the Empire works. Given how large and expansive the galaxy is, it makes sense that the Empire would outsource the task to security companies like the pre-moor authorities to govern less important planets. We get our first look at the NS-9 star path with the Imperial insignia on it as Cassian prepares to meet the buyer the next morning. We cut back to Kenari, and as the group move up on the crash site, we see some green yellowish noxious gas coming out of the ship. Luthen arrives on the planet and Cassian gives B comms for later. Back at home, Marva looks for B and she enters Cassian's room where she finds his old blowpipe. Next to it is a toy bantha. Back to the flashback, we get to see bodies around the crash site. It's likely that these guys were poisoned by the gas leak. On some of the bodies, we see them using what looks to be a sort of oxygen mask, very reminiscent of the Romer 6 breathe mask that was used in The Empire Strikes Back. We can also see the yellowish skin likely caused by whatever poisoned them. One of the ship's survivor gets up and shoots one of the tribe members, and the rest proceed to make him a porcupine. As the rest of the tribe carry the dead body back, Cassian decides to venture further into the ship. Cassian tries to buy a transport off-world, and as he is talking to the ticket office, we learn that the guy is looking up the planet Kenari. We then learn that the official reason for the abandonment of the mine was due to an Imperial mining disaster, which is the same reason given after the incident on Jedha. So this is really just standard Imperial cover-up of what is really going on down there. The alien in the back is called Granick, who is played by Kiran Shah, who also played the Ewok Breathup, who was on the drums back in the Return of the Jedi. Cassian asks for transport to Tassar, and this seems like a new location entirely. There is, however, a Commander Tassar who served the Eternal Empire during the Old Republic era. As Luthen approaches the town, he speaks to a very friendly old chap. This right here is the actor Ron Cook, who was the location accountant for The Empire Strikes Back. Again, another cool Easter egg here. And now we go on to episode 3. Cassian decides to venture further into the ship and stumbles across more dead bodies. Here he proceeds to just smash everything in sight out of anger. Cassian meets Brasa once more and tells him that Marva will have his money once everything falls through. The pre-moor make their landing and they are spotted by none other than Brasa himself. We then transition to the flashback where we see a much younger B with significantly less problems alongside a much younger Marva. Next to her is a character by the name of Clem who also has the same last name, Andor. We learn that a Republic ship is fast approaching and Marva states that they can't leave the boy here. She also mentions that the moment the Republic figures out that the local inhabitants killed a Republic officer, it's going to be open season, giving us a much darker look at the Republic and probably places this after the events of Order 66 as the Republic begins its transition into the Empire. The pre-moor find Marva and interrogate her, and they find B as well. The pre-moor managed to track down Cassian through his comms, but outside an angry mob of people are gathering. Cassian finally meets Luthen and they begin to negotiate. One of the local residents spot the authorities and they begin to sound the alarm, and word gets out to Bix about the situation. Bix finds out Tim ratted Cassian out and Bix decides to go after Cassian. Luthen attempts to recruit Cassian and he then figures out that they have been trapped. The pre-moor catches a suspicious looking Bix and proceeds to brutalize her. Tim tries to save her and he gets shot by one of the cops. Way to go, Tim, now you're a dead rat. The cop that shot Tim gets sent back to the ship for being too trigger happy. Marva intimidates the cop in her house and Brasso puts a nasty surprise for the pre-moor ship. We then get to hear the word
Shit.
for the first time in Star Wars. Not sure why they did that here, but it wouldn't be the first time an earthly curse visited Star Wars. The pre-moor authorities try to set up a trap for Cassian and Luthen, but they are all taken by surprise, allowing them to make their escape. In the closing shots, we see how this event has affected everyone in town, and how this will eventually set up the seeds for rebellion as well as their respective character motivations. And with that, the adventure begins. So that was the breakdown for episode 1, 2, and 3 of Andor. So far, I am really loving how things have started and I cannot wait to see what's next. I will of course be doing a few other videos explaining what was going on during these episodes, so for more, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. I am the Lost Acolyte,
and I have spoken.